What if Ahsoka had returned to the Jedi Temple during Order 66? The air was thick with smoke and chaos when Ahsoka's shuttle entered Coruscant's atmosphere. The Jedi Temple, standing tall against the night sky, was burning. The familiar blue beacon of its spires was flickering, warning of an emergency within. Ahsoka had returned home, only to find it under siege. Beside her, Maul stirred, still restrained in the force cage she had placed him in. His golden eyes gleamed with intrigue as he saw the temple in flames. "Ah, the fall of the Jedi," he murmured. "I told you, child. You were always destined to be here." Ahsoka ignored him, her mind racing. She reached out through the Force, hoping to sense Master Yoda, Obi-Wan, anyone, but all she felt was death, betrayal, and darkness. Then she felt him, Anakin, and he was inside the temple, leading the attack. Her breath caught. No, that wasn't possible. "Skywalker," Maul drawled, sensing her distress. "You feel it, don't you? He has become Sidious' pawn. I tried to warn you." Ahsoka turned on him, stepping closer to the Force cage, her voice tight. "If you truly hate Sidious," she said, "then now's your chance." She released him. Maul grinned, stepping out of the Force cage and rolling his shoulders. "Ah, little one," he said, retrieving his dual-bladed lightsaber from a nearby crate. "You may yet be more dangerous than I thought." She held up a warning hand. "You get your chance to run. I suggest you take it." "I have my own plans," Maul said smoothly, igniting his red blade. "But I do appreciate the head start." Then, with a burst of Force speed, Maul leapt into the shadows, toward the oncoming 501st clones. The first squad of clones never saw him coming. Maul dropped from the ceiling like a predator, bisecting the leading trooper before he could even lift his rifle. With a fluid motion, he spun his saber behind him, impaling two more. The hallways erupted into blaster fire, but Maul was already moving. He leapt over their heads, twisting mid-air, his blade cutting through the clones like a storm. He grabbed one trooper with the Force, using him as a human shield against the onslaught of red bolts. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he sent the clone hurling into his comrades, knocking them down like dominoes. More squads rushed in, flanking him. He only grinned. With a single gesture, he ripped the door panels off the walls and sent them flying into the troopers, crushing them instantly. He leapt over the barricade, spinning, slicing, and carving his way through the clone ranks. Then, he saw an ARC trooper trying to radio for reinforcements. With a snap of his fingers, Maul yanked the comlink from the clone's grip and crushed it in the air. "I believe," Maul mused, stepping forward, "that your reinforcements won't be coming." The trooper reached for his pistol. Too late. Maul drove his saber through his chest. He turned toward the escape route. With the Jedi distracted, he would vanish into the chaos. The moment Ahsoka entered the temple, she was overwhelmed. Bodies littered the grand halls, Jedi and clones alike. The once pristine marble floors were streaked with blood and ash, the walls scorched with blaster fire and lightsaber burns. Statues of great Jedi Masters had been toppled and shattered, their remnants scattered among the dead. She heard a youngling scream in terror from a distant corridor. Then came the sound of blaster fire. Ahsoka moved on instinct, her twin blue sabers igniting as she sprinted toward the sound. She turned a corner to see a group of clone troopers advancing on a pair of Jedi padawans, both barely in their teens. Ahsoka struck. She was a blur of motion, her blades deflecting the blaster bolts before she leaped into the fray. Her sabers carved through the troopers in precise, deadly arcs, cutting them down before they could react. One of the padawans collapsed, trembling. The other, a Twi'lek girl, barely managed to lift her own lightsaber. You're not safe anymore, Ahsoka said quickly. Go. Find the others. Don't stop running. The Padawans nodded, disappearing down the corridor. Ahsoka pressed forward, her sabers slicing through the growing numbers of troopers. Explosions rocked the halls as the temple's defenses crumbled. Then, as she neared the grand chamber leading to the Padawan training hall, she saw him. Anakin Skywalker. He stood at the far end of the hall, his dark robe billowing, his face partially obscured by the glow of his ignited blue saber. And in front of him stood the terrified Padawans. Ahsoka felt her stomach drop. Anakin! He didn't answer. He only raised his lightsaber. Ahsoka moved on instinct, leaping between Anakin and the children, her sabers crossed in a defensive stance. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Anakin's face was hard, unreadable. "Stand down, Ahsoka." She shook her head. "I don't believe this. I know you. You wouldn't." "You don't know anything," he interrupted, stepping forward. His voice was cold, emotionless. "The Jedi betrayed the Republic. They betrayed me." He struck. Ahsoka barely had time to parry, her sabers locking against his with a crackling hiss. The impact rattled her arms. Anakin was stronger than he'd ever been before. With a burst of power, he shoved her back, sending her skidding across the temple floor. He lunged again, faster than she'd ever seen him move. She ducked under his swiping strike, countering with a low kick to his side. He barely reacted, twisting his body and slamming his elbow into her back, knocking the air from her lungs. Ahsoka rolled away, using the momentum to launch into a spinning counterattack. Her sabers whirled in a defensive blur, forcing Anakin to step back. But his movements were measured, controlled. This wasn't the same Anakin she had fought beside. This was something else. Something darker. She needed to get through to him. "I know about Padme," she said between breaths. Anakin stopped mid-step. Ahsoka pressed forward. "You're doing this for her, aren't you?" His grip tightened on his saber. "You think she'd want this?" Ahsoka continued. "You think she'd want you to murder children?" His breathing hitched, but then his face hardened again. "Sidious lied to you," she said. "Maul told me everything. This was his plan. You were his plan. He used your fear against you, just like he used Dooku. You're just another pawn in his game." Anakin growled, slashing at her with a renewed fury. Their blades crashed together, lighting up the dim corridor with blue fire. Ahsoka fought with everything she had, but Anakin was relentless. Every strike was heavier, angrier, fueled by something far worse than rage, grief. She was losing. Then she saw it, the flicker of hesitation in his eyes. His old self, buried beneath the darkness. And Ahsoka took her chance. She deactivated one saber and lunged, slamming the hilt against his wrist. His blade wavered, just for a second. That was all she needed. She caught his free hand in hers, gripping it tightly. "You're stronger than this." Anakin froze. He looked at the younglings, at the terror in their eyes. Then, after a long moment, he took out his calm and ordered the 501st to stand down. "Ahsoka," he whispered. His eyes, no longer glowing with Sith corruption, filled with something else. Regret. Pain. She stepped back, giving him space. "We have to stop him," she said gently. "We have to stop Palpatine." Anakin took a slow, shuddering breath. Then he nodded. The two turned toward the shadows looming over Coruscant. Sidious awaited, and this time they would fight him together. Sidious was not pleased. As Anakin and Ahsoka stormed into his private chambers, the Sith Lord's yellowed gaze narrowed. "So," he mused, "you have returned to the light, Lord Vader?" Anakin ignited his saber. "My name is Anakin Skywalker," Sidious sneered. "Then you will die as Anakin Skywalker." The room erupted in lightning and flame. Sidious unleashed a torrent of Sith lightning, sending Anakin and Ahsoka crashing backward. Anakin barely caught the attack on his blade, his arms trembling under the sheer force of the Dark Lord's power. Ahsoka moved fast, darting around Sidious with the speed of a shadow, her sabers spinning. She struck low, forcing the Sith Lord to shift focus. Sidious countered with inhuman speed, spinning through the air with a howl, his crimson blade clashing against both Anakin and Ahsoka. The duel was a storm of motion. Sidious struck with blinding ferocity, forcing them to fight as one to keep up. Ahsoka was fast. Anakin was powerful. But Sidious was pure darkness. With a snarl, he flung Ahsoka across the chamber, slamming her against a pillar. She collapsed, her vision swimming. Sidious raised his hands, dark lightning crackling. Anakin roared, unleashing the full power of the Force, catching the lightning and sending it back at the Sith Lord. Sidious screamed, his own attack overwhelming him. Anakin pressed forward, his saber striking in blinding, precise movements, each attack fueled by righteous fury. With a final strike, Anakin severed Sidious' hands. The Dark Lord collapsed, his body writhing in agony. Then Anakin delivered the final blow. Ahsoka, regaining herself, looked up. "It's over," she whispered. Anakin stood over the fallen Emperor, his blade humming. He had won. Sidious was finished. For the first time in years, Anakin Skywalker was truly free. Drop the scenarios you would like to see in the comments, and I will pick one every week. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one.